You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
Termina هناك لشوارزنيجر.
Ya lo hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, golazo, golazo, golazo.
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Kevin, summer's officially over. It's the first day of fall.
First day of fall. And you know who fell yesterday, Duane, in the League Cup? The Foxes. Even though they come out at fall this time, they just went back to sleep because a great comeback by Chelsea. I had to put it out there.
There you go. And, they're probably happy with that. It was an extra time when they now in the League Cup where they don't have to do replays or anything like that. They just go straight to the extra time and then penalties eventually. So some results there. We're not going to go through game by game in the League Cup. We'll probably maybe do a bit of a review heading into the next round when there's fewer games. We'll do a little closer in the attention. Man City, Swansea today. What I'll be doing this afternoon. I do enjoy the League Cup. As I said, it is a little bit of a relaxing break in the season. You want to win, but it's not quite as intense as maybe it might be otherwise, particularly in the early rounds. So it's kind of fun for if you take the right attitude to it. The League Cup can be a lot of fun, guys. You get to see some players you might not see otherwise, and if you lose, well, it was just the League Cup.
You'll get to see Yaya Toure, maybe, no? Maybe not.
Oh, I don't know. He hasn't apologized yet.
Oh, yeah, okay.
More news on that. Apparently, his agent has said that there's no way in hell he's apologizing. And Pep said that when Toure moved to City back in 2010, 2011, whatever it was, since 2010, that Pep told him that he was moving to quote unquote a blank football club. And so why would he do that? And then now he's going to the blank football club himself now because he only chases the money. It's getting kind of ugly. Not the fortunate way that you'd want a player like Toure to end his Manchester City days, but it was always going to be this way really with him. So, hey, it is what it is. He's not playing today, I wouldn't suspect, Kevin.
No, exactly.
All right. Speaking of somebody that might not be playing, there's a segue.
Maybe a team that might be playing.
Yeah, look, this isn't a story that we've been following now for about 3 months, I think. 2 months anyway. That's the Fort Lauderdale Strikers of the NASL. And it came out today. It's being reported that basically their Brazilian owners have thrown the keys on the table. That
they disappeared. They shut down the accounts and we're just done. As of September 1st, just you take it. It's yours.
Exactly. They've just walked away from it. And at this point in time, the NASL is being forced to pick it up, to keep this team afloat, to pay the bills and so on and so forth so that they can finish the season. This is unfortunate because, well, it's unfortunate, obviously, for the fans of Fort Lauderdale. They may not be many, but there are some, and you always feel for that. But it's also unfortunate for the league and for the rest of the teams because this is not necessarily a league that is thriving financially, and suddenly they have the burden of keeping this other team afloat. Steven Sandor suggested today that there is a slush fund for this very kind of thing, an emergency slush fund that they collect from that they're dipping into right now.
But right now we're talking about a money situation that goes between 1.25 to 1.75 million. It was reported by Neil Morris today, a reliable sources on NASL, and he works closely to the Carolina Hawks. That's a team he covers the beat. But, for the entire league situation, we're talking about big numbers here that the league leads to put in to the Fort Lauderdale because it's basically players and contracts and those obligations. They're not even going to take care of third-party vendors, example, the security or things like this that do have unpaid bill as we speak.
No, precisely. And it's Yeah, it's just like any company that goes bankrupt when this happens, stuff like this happens. And I mean, they haven't gone bankrupt yet, but that's what the league's trying to prevent from happening, just by keeping them afloat for the rest of the year and then just let them quietly go into whatever. If they can get most of the obligations paid off for this year, they don't enter into any more obligations for next year, and they can avoid that. But nonetheless, I think what it probably means is that it is going to be very difficult to envision a scenario in which Fort Lauderdale it's becoming increasingly difficult to envision there being a league next year. I'm not going to say that that's quite yet over the 50% threshold of unlikely, but right now we know that Real OKC is likely out. The Fort Lauderdale Strikers look like they're out. We know Minnesota United is leaving. There's strong rumors that the Ottawa Fury are prepared to walk away to at least go feral for a year and perhaps reemerge in some other league, whether it be the Canadian Premier League or the USL or whatever they can work out. You combine that with San Antonio leaving last year to go to USL, and Atlanta sort of folding up shop as well when United came in. And you have 6 teams that have been out of this league in the last 2 years. And that's
what if you're the San Francisco Deltas, what are you thinking right now? Like, okay, we're already committed to going there next year with our first year. What are we getting ourselves into?
Well, precisely. I mean, you could be down to right now. If things shake out in a worst case scenario, there might just be 8 teams back in this league again, which means that you're probably into a single table and you're probably traveling down to Puerto Rico more than you thought, and the expenses are there, and like it's just kind of a mishmash league of some isolated islands with a little core down in Florida, although they'll be missing one team down there. I don't know what the answer is, and you mentioned it yesterday on the show, this idea of merging, which would be really just going back to the original situation before NASL broke away.
It wouldn't be a merger at this point. It would be the USL absorbing a few NASL teams.
Yeah.
Probably not all 8 or 9 of them, depending on what the situation is. That's going to be the question. And there's a lot of implication because, example, if you're Ottawa, you're trying to go to the USL for one season, whatever, and then you have to go with the CSA that they say they wouldn't, the accreditation process. It's getting close to complicated with everything that's unraveling. And let's face it, NSL could be there next year, could have 8-9 teams, could have new teams resurfacing that we didn't hear about. That could happen. It happened before the NSL. So that is the one interesting point. But right now, the future doesn't seem so bright for the league, unfortunately.
Yeah, and look, it has some repercussions beyond it. Look at a team like you mentioned the Canadian situation. So speaking as a Canadian for a second, if the Fury go feral for a year and maybe just keep their reserve team running in the PLSQ or maybe even League One or whatever, who knows where they want to go with that. But if they keep a team going there on that level, that's okay. But ultimately, you're taking a big drop in quality, both for the market. I know that some of the Fury fans that I know would probably continue to go out and support whatever version of that team is out there. But
you lose all the games that you made. You lose the progress of the last 3 years.
Yeah, you're going to lose 90. Other than your supporters groups guys, your Bytown boys, your Story Monday Riots, those guys, like your hardcores, you're probably not getting the rest of the casuals out anymore to anything lower than the level they're currently at. So that's unfortunate because there was a real nice thing going there, and it was beginning to look like Ottawa was slowly building into a market that could even aspire to go to a higher level at some point, right? That would just be off the table. Edmonton, I don't know what the hell happens with Edmonton, right? I don't know at all what would go on because I can't see the USL being all that interested in them either because it's just so far out there. Canadian League's not going to be started in 2017. I can say that with almost certainty now. That 2018 is the earliest that it would start, and they need to make an announcement on that very soon as well. So you're just looking at kind of a lost momentum of all these markets, and that's just unfortunate for up here. And down there in the States, down to where a lot of our listeners are, it can absorb this a lot better, but there still is a type of fan that I'm not sure will be served by the USL. And we make fun of them sometimes. We do. We tease them. Some of them deserve it because they're, like reaction, like their reaction to the rest of us is a little bit off base sometimes. But there are fans out there that legitimately just like that alternative that may not want to be in the league that MLS controls so much, that may want that independence. And I think that there's a place for that, and there's enough market in the United States for that. And it'd be unfortunate for this to happen. I'm looking at fan reaction right now, Kevin, and I'll just read one real quick. This is from a Reddit stream on the NASL site, / NASL Soccer. r/NASL Soccer. This is honestly, at this point, I just hope there's no reserve teams or whatever in whatever league we end up merging into, is what this person has written. This is a Cosmos fan. I have bad news for the Cosmos fan. If you're merging into USL, there's going to be reserve teams in there. And
they're going to beat you sometimes.
Yeah, you're going to have to get over that if you want to continue to support this team. There's not going to be Pro Rel going into MLS anytime soon, folks. There's just not. I mean, you can bash your head against the wall all you want on that. The reality is it's not happening. However, I could see a situation, to get this back on top, if there was this merger, that you might have 2 tiers of USL, because that is really where we're getting at this point. We've talked about this before, Kevin, and I continue to put this out as an idea, as a slight variation of Pro Rel. You're not totally open for sure, but it does allow those USL teams, if you were to open it up and bring in a few NASL teams, allow the reserve teams to stay, that you could find your level. And I think that would benefit both the teams like FC Montreal and TFC Academy, TFC 2.
And maybe you call it USL Prime or something, that's a nice word nowadays. It's been used often by companies and such. USL Prime, you have maybe the standalone teams and the NASL teams that would be absorbed, maybe. And maybe you have the top academy, and you have a USL soccer bowl at the end or something.
Yeah, look, and what all that really would do is, if you create that, if you come down and you have a merger with USL, you're admitting at that point that your complete chaos theory of management may not be the best for soccer in this part of the world, that you may need a little bit more central control, that you may need not necessarily central control to the extreme of MLS, but some oversight that's a little bit more stable than what we're seeing in the NASL right now, to keep your teams afloat. Because I don't care how much of an single entity fan you are in Fort Lauderdale today, if you're waking up to the news that you're about to lose your team, would you rather keep that team with a little bit more central control, or just lose it outright? Right? That's where I come down on that.
Yeah, the choice is not like, can you choose another team that doesn't exist? No, another league, that doesn't exist. No, the choice is between, do you want your team to fold or just survive somewhere? Yeah. So basically, beggars can be choosers at some point.
Yeah, and so I do like that. I think it gets unwieldy, and this is why I do think you need to look at splitting or sort of whatever this USL is, even without the NASL teams in. I do think that they need to start to think about a split between 2 different tiers at some point, because there's just so much variation in the teams right now, and I see that firsthand here in Toronto, and you do in Montreal as well, where those young teams really struggle. And if they were playing other teams closer to their level, I think that there might be more benefit to that than getting their ass handed to them for half the season each year. That's where I come down on that. And it would also be a way to appease people that want to see some form of Pro Rel there, if you had those 2 tiers and allowed some movement between them. And I think that that's a win-win for everyone, Kevin.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's a possibility. But we'll follow this situation with the NASL, because it is interesting. There is ramification for both U.S. side and the Canadian side, where players like Maxime Tissot with the Ottawa Fury, what's going to happen next year. A lot of implication. There's Canadian players playing in the USL, playing in the NASL level, playing in the MLS level. All those are going to a lot of questions this offseason. It's a very weird offseason with what's at least the perception of trouble in the NASL.
Yeah, on that from real quickly, a player that I have a lot of time for, that I had a chance to talk to a few times when he was with Toronto FC, Nana Decora. It's a guy that's probably not in national team plans anymore. That's going to play out his string as a professional footballer, and had probably found a home in Fort Lauderdale where he was excelling finally. So I feel really bad for a guy like that, who's, like I said, a good player, a guy that had some struggles that he went through, that he overcame and managed to re-get his career back on path. It's terrible that he's going to lose that. And that's the real victims here. These guys, their livelihoods are being pulled out, that they thought they had a stable situation. And now, because of the structure of the league and because the lack of controls around it, they may be once again floating in the wilderness. And that's unfortunate. Okay, Kevin, let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll come back.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
steam. We're back. We're going to go across the ocean now for a topic that's picking up some steam, Kevin. West Ham United, of course, they moved into their new stadium.
The Olympic Stadium.
This year. They moved from an iconic small little community stadium there that was in East London for a long time. And this is a big change for their West Ham fans. And there's a lot of growing pains in the early days. If you go and read some of the normal places where fans talk, you can find a lot of complaints about this. There was an article today that came out that like a West Ham legend said that, quote unquote, that the Olympic Stadium isn't a football ground, that it just didn't feel like a football game to him there. And there's a lot of concerns about this. So this is a topic, as I said.
My first answer, Duane. No, bleep, Captain Obvious. No, it is not a soccer stadium. It wasn't designed to be. It wasn't renovated to be. But you have to sometimes take ownership of a place and make it your own. And that does take some time. We're talking about 2 league games, for Christ's sake. You know, give it a little time. You know, it's a place needs to be taken advantage, like ownership of. And you need to, in time, example, take some seating out, change the angle, add a little bit of angle here and there. Yes, but you need to figure it out first.
Yeah, no doubt. It is only a very short time they're in this stadium, and they were in their other stadium for a very long time, right? So obviously there's going to be growing pains. There would have been regardless. I saw this from the move to Main Road to what's now called the Etihad. I saw the same thing there, right? So that's something that you have to get through. There's one post I'm looking here. I'm relying on Reddit a lot today. I'm just going to read something here that there's 7 lists of issues this particular fan has. And I think there is something to talk about in all of these. There is some relative here because the club's got to adjust too a little bit, right? So one of the complaints that they're having is that there was a failed migration. So basically that they didn't really factor in what type of fan was sitting in what type of section when they moved them from the old ground to the new ground and added the new fans in. So that you have quote unquote singing fans or more ultra fans that are intermixed with families. And we see that here in MLS as well, where clubs in Seattle did a really good job of this when they started of asking fans, like doing a detailed thing where if I remember back, they asked, like, you know, do you want to sing? Do you want to stand? Do you want to do all this? So that they were putting people in the place where they'd feel more comfortable. And it doesn't sound like this has necessarily happened there. They basically added this guy says they've angered longstanding fans with ticket lotteries while selling a block of tickets right next to the away fans to Thomas Cook to distribute for football holidays. So that really triggers them a little bit to have casuals in there or tourists in there. That's a triggering for an English fan. Look, I think that one of the problems here with this modern football stuff, and this is what this all comes down to, is that it runs counter to how a lot of people see their sport and their team in the UK and in parts of Europe. They absorb the sport a little differently than what we're used to here in North America. It's one of the reasons I think, Kevin, why some European fans, some English fans really don't like those of us that don't have the right accent cheering for their team, is because they view us as being interlopers that are coming in with these ideas that they don't interest in. They feel that they have a greater level of community with their teams. It's not necessarily about wins and losses, but the modern football game comes in and it's all about the wins and losses, and it's all about commodifying and making money and winning games and all that. So this bigger and bigger stadium push is part of that, and that's what a lot of this resistance comes down to. And I don't know what the answer to that is, because it's not going away. But nonetheless, I do empathize a little bit with them feeling that they've lost a little bit of their community, because that is such a huge part to supporting a team. We see it here as well, too, right? Like, part of the reason why TFC, to use my own backyard, survived the bleak years was because people would buy tickets because in the end of the day, they didn't want to stop hanging out on Saturdays with their friends. Whatever the hell was happening in the background was irrelevant to them hanging out with their friends, right?
But that's going to happen, but you need to let it grow to a bigger scale. Like, it doesn't happen overnight as well. Once everybody gets used to it and start hanging out with everybody next to each other for a few games, not just 2, but a few seasons, go through ups and downs, go through trophies, go to relegation, whatever the case may be, something that gets you together as a fan, that emotional level. Until that's reached, of course you're not going to feel the stadium that it's worthy or that it's a football ground. Don't get me wrong, first time they lift a trophy at that stadium, it's going to be rocking, whatever the trophy is. So that's going to happen, and you need those moments to gel and literally break into place.
Yeah. The one point that I will give them a little bit, I do think there's something to be looked at, is that one of the decision was made when they moved in to not have the regular police there. So Bobbies aren't in there. It's just this private security firm. And there are a lot of stories coming out of this private security firm sort of acting like, out of control bouncers in some way. That there's some talk of them not really understanding how to control a football crowd, them being a little too pedantic, not really understanding the organic nature and how to control rather than just enforce. And that is something that, I'm not there to comment directly on, but certainly if that is the case and the idea that there's not police in there, I think is a mistake. So hopefully these growing pains are something that the club can look at and find something that works for them in that way and that works for the fans as well. And, I do think that when you're doing security for a game, any sporting competition is more about controlling an environment rather than just strictly enforcing rules, because that's just going to lead to a greater level of resistance to that. That's human nature. And I think that there's maybe some issues there. And anyway, I thought this was worth bringing up, Kevin, just to talk about it. Maybe we'll continue to follow it and maybe get a guest down the line that's closer to the situation to talk about it if it continues to grow. But I thought that was worth talking.
I always have time for West Ham, Duane. They're my second London team.
Your second London team? Okay.
Oh, yeah, of course, because Chelsea's first. But that's
all right,
another story for another day. That actually it's a good segue, because starting next week, Duane, I will be able to play as Alex Hunter, going through the ranks of my club to try to make it to the starting 11.
Oh, boy. It's FIFA 17 time. Kevin, what are you excited about FIFA 17? Next Monday, right? Monday at midnight?
Yes, exactly. I'm excited for a lot of things. The legacy mode, I think it's called. Anyways, the career mode has been redefined with a storyline, and it seems very, very fun to play. The graphics, the design, the physics of the game are better than ever before. The demo is quite impressive, so I can't wait to do that. And I hope that I'm better than in NHL 17, because this is driving me crazy. Since last week, I've been trying to win games and I can't. Getting beat by 10-year-olds on NHL is driving the ever-living life out of my joy out of my life. So yeah, I can't wait for the FIFA.
Well, Kevin, who has seen me play FIFA when I was up for the CONCACAF Champions League final last year, I was in Kevin's apartment playing FIFA there, and so he knows that if you really want to win a game, you could just buy me a system and play me, because I am crap. I am perhaps the world's worst FIFA player. So that's a thing that happened. There is a funny story that came out. The MLS ratings showed up, and someone isolated the LA Galaxies and saw that Landon Donovan was an 86, the highest ranked player on the Galaxy, having only played at that point 10 minutes. So
yeah, it's FIFA is made in Vancouver for the most part, but they're not necessarily, I guess. They know a lot of players, but I guess their view on skills and which player it is are a little bit skewed. So that's why maybe Donovan has an 86, but no, it will be interesting. I guess a lot of people will play with Manchester United now that they have Zlatan and Pogba and that, because they're always favorite of FIFA players. Anybody but Madrid or Barcelona. I'm just sick of playing against them every single time. Madrid, Barca. Oh, please, can you choose another team?
Yeah, well, precisely. I mean, shouldn't there be like a way?
We're going to be a lot of cities this year, though.
The FIFA online to like control like the level, like shouldn't the matchups be better?
You can, but you're not going to find anybody.
Okay, so
I've tried to keep it to 3-star level to play against the impact against anybody, because the impact for a 3-star level team, because of Drogba and Piatti, you can actually be really effective with them because the defenders suck on the other team. So that being said, you never find anybody to play against,
because everyone wants to play with big clubs.
Everybody wants to be Ronaldo and score that goal and do that celebration,
because they're 10-year-olds.
Yes,
that's how 10-year-olds think.
You know that the average player of FIFA is like 30.
I don't doubt that, but it's probably the average player. I don't understand how anyone gets good at that, but you have to have like 7 hours. You have to play 17 hours a day to be the best player in the world.
Basically, it's a job when it comes to that level. There's actually competition in League, and at that level, I don't know. I'm not that good, so I never really got there. But no, I was ranked at some point, like in FIFA 14. I got it like at midnight, and 2 days later, I was like ranked 25,000 in the world. That's like my claim to fame. I felt good that day, and then I stopped playing for a day, and I was just out of the rankings already.
Yeah, because you got to play constantly.
You just can't stop playing. Sleep, girlfriends, anything else, life, work,
I would suggest that you're not losing to 10-year-olds. You're probably losing to 19-year-olds is probably what it is. 19-year-olds that are living
They know what they're
moment.
doing, but not too much. So you can't really predict in soccer term, because if you're actually like a soccer geek like I am, I'm like, my formation is tricked out. I know exactly what I want to do. I play with a system, with a playing style. Then you just play against a guy who just booted and headed into the net all the freaking time.
Well, which might work too. So yeah, what is the AI like on it? Is it decent?
It's
Last
amazing.
year's really. I mean, I haven't played this one, I know, but
It's amazing. It's like playing actual soccer. It's like playing actual pickup soccer. If you're playing like 11 versus 11 or 5 versus 5, it's actually like playing pickup soccer.
so that's fun. I will fully admit I'm looking at the video game systems in my house here right now, and they're all older. I have a lot of retro games here, but I've never really had a new gen system. I'm thinking of one, so maybe you can beat me in FIFA there, Kevin. I am thinking of getting one, maybe for buying one for myself for Christmas. But I never really had the experience of playing online. My whole video game experience for the years has always been about playing the computer, beating the computer, which sometimes got a little easy back in the early days of FIFA.
No, exactly. You used to just like always go to the right, then cut to the left, and just shoot it in the top corner. You used to always go in, just like in NHL.
Well, NHL, we called it the J goal, is what we called it. And so you
Exactly.
make a J, and you score every time. So,
And guess what? It doesn't work anymore in NHL 17. So we're like, oh man, we can't score.
Yeah, well, we used to play when I was on my Sega Genesis back in the day.
94.
Yeah, NHL 94, the famous. We had a rule amongst our friends that you could not score that goal. That was, if you scored that goal, it was null and void. You'd lose the game. You had to score through a one-timer or through some other means, and that was the rule that we had. The one-timer goals got pretty easy too on that one as well. But we're talking about NHL now, so NHL 94.
But no, FIFA 17 next week. It's gonna be quite the adventure. I can't wait. I'm off 2 days after it comes out. Guess what I'm doing the entire day outside of soccer today during those 2 days? You don't have to guess far. I'm on FIFA 17, taking a break from getting my ass kicked on the NHL 17.
Fair enough. Quick question. Over the years of you playing FIFA, Kevin, what's your favorite player to have played with?
Always liked playing with Frank Lampard back in FIFA 11, FIFA 12 because of his free kick and long range ability. I used to score goals from 30 yards day in, day out with Frankie Lampard. Super Frank on the free kick every time in the back of the net. That has to be my claim to fame. FIFA 11, FIFA 12 with Frankie Lampard and Chelsea.
All right, and this career mode, how long has the career mode thing been in?
It's been there forever, but this the first. It's based on the idea of the 2K career mode, where you're a player, you have a storyline, you have a name, an identity, you go through the ranks of college and all that. It's kind of like this, but through the academy. Then you make it to the first team. You get to meet the coach. You can choose the team. So it could be Marino, it could be Pep, it could be all those. You see the interaction, you see the growth of the player. You get to live great moments. His first goal, his first touches, those type of thing are really put an emphasis on in this iteration of the career mode. And that's why I can't wait to try it, is to actually, because why are we all playing this? Because we want to vicariously live the life of an academy and go through the ranks. If you be a pro mode, because that's the evolution of it, that's what we want to feel, and that's what they created. So that's why I can't wait. Like, you actually get to walk into the locker room, those little details, but that makes a big difference.
Fair enough. One game I have played with that kind of model in the past was an MLB game where you went
through exactly the same base, the show or 2K NBA,
Yeah, you eventually get to Major League Baseball. You have to go through your, college single A, double A. Yeah,
it takes forever. I only did it once, and it's in the show 15. It took me about 2 months of playing almost every day to finally get to the majors.
All right. Were you an Expo? Can you be an Expo in the show 15? Probably can't anymore. Can you?
Why did you have to go that way? That wound is not closed yet, but look for a sports it's in the game coming back with the 17 edition version, NHL, in the next few weeks with David Foote. He's going to join me to talk about that game, because we have been swearing a lot together at TV, and we're going to talk about this. And the weeks following FIFA 17 review, we'll play deep. We'll go deep into it, and we'll talk about it on sports it's in the game.
Yeah, I'm probably going to buy Football Manager, the new version, so maybe you can have me on and I'll talk about it again.
Absolutely, just like last year.
Let's take a break. We'll come back. It's going to be USL Radio when we come back after the break.
This is USL Radio on the Sports Podcasting Network, the longest running podcast entirely dedicated to the USL.
Welcome back to USL Radio Time, Kevin.
Yes.
All right. So what we're going to do today is we have Jeff DiVeronica on from Rochester. He's down there, writes for the newspaper down there. We're going to talk to him about the Rhino season as defending champions. They are right on the cusp of the playoffs here right now as we enter into the final stretch of this season. I'm going to talk about them and their season and sort of look at the Eastern Conference a little closely. But before we do that, I thought we'd just take a bit of a up to sort of look at things right now in case you haven't been paying as much attention to this. Look at how things stand as we head into the final bit of the regular season, Kevin. And in the East, what I find interesting is that the New York Red Bulls 2 story at the top of the Eastern Conference right now.
They won the league for the second year in a row.
Yeah, and it does strike you, and you look at the amount of players that the Red Bulls 2 have graduated into MLS already. Now, they're not quite being the prime players in their position necessarily at the first team level, just quite yet, but they are graduating into full-time tournaments. It does suggest to you that the Red Bulls are doing a lot of good things at the academy level. And you know what? The company Red Bulls, as we see with the situation in Germany right now and around the world, they sometimes get some bad flack, but if you look at the work they do at the academy levels at all of their teams, you got to really tip your hat to them. They're doing good work, and the Red Bulls 2 are absolutely an example of that. They have such a great advantage being in New York, and I always thought that when NYCFC came in, that they would have immediately, with City Football Group, I would have thought that was why they were going in, to immediately get their foot in that market for prospects, but they haven't really done that. And Red Bulls are taking advantage of that by continuing to gobble up the top talent in what is a talent-rich area, Kevin.
Yeah, because it's a deeply populated area, too densely populated area. But if you're looking at FC Cincinnati, impressive team this year, their first season in USL, record attendance, many games, overall record for the amount of people in the entire season in the USL's history. So for FC Cincinnati, what's interesting to me is they're third in the Eastern Conference. They're going to be in playoff. They have a bye, first four of each conferences. So it's going to be interesting. The playoff picture is almost set. Yes, there's only one spot on each conference left. But outside of that, it's the last week of USL, and it's very intriguing. This potential matchup, rivalries, derby game. Louisville is strong. FC Cincinnati is strong. Charlotte, the Battery is Charleston and Rochester there. So it's interesting too. The kickers as well. Team Orlando is on the cusp, and so is Wilmington. They're announced to have maybe a hiatus, go dormant next year.
Yeah, so they're next door next year. Yeah,
that's the word right now. So that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and if you don't know how the playoffs work, it is top 8 make it. Strictly a bracket from there. So 1-8, 4-5, 3-6, 2-7 will play in the first round, and then they go to a semifinals, conference finals. They don't reseed, so if there's an upset, that team will take that seed the rest of the way, right? So if the Red Bulls were to lose to the 8th seed, that 8th seed would then take the number 1 seed the rest of the way through in terms of who they would play. They would play the winner of 4-5. So that's how the playoffs work within the USL, Kevin. Yeah, and as you
go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say there are right now 3 spots that are guaranteed. In terms of that they're set in the bracket already. The Red Bulls are in as the number 1 seed. FC Cincinnati will be the number 3 seed in the East, and Louisville the number 2 seed in the East. Of some Canadian content in Louisville, so up here we'll be cheering for them a little bit, I suspect. That's an interesting team too, Louisville.
Right?
Sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
K?
Yeah, they have aspirations to go to a higher level, and they're the team that no one talks about. That they are doing very well on the scoreboard aspect of things. And it sort of does beg a question whether what's more impressive. Cincinnati's doing well on the scoreboard too, but they spent a lot of money to do it. Whether what Louisville is doing on a more organic level in terms of not bringing in a lot of people right immediately off the hop, spending big money to be competitive immediately, they've sort of built a team that's been successful. Whether that's more impressive than what Cincinnati's done to an MLS. I suspect Cincinnati's probably more impressive because they look at those butts in the seats and they see dollar signs. But nonetheless, it is an interesting difference in how they approach to try and get the attention.
We always pronounce it wrong. It's Louisville, so it's Louisville City FC.
Louisville, okay.
It's Louisville. That's how you pronounce it. If you're from Louisville, you pronounce it Louisville City FC.
Well, it's like New Orleans.
Come on, Duane. It's Nolans.
Yeah, or it's like Toronto up here. Don't pronounce that second T.
It's Toronto. Toronto. N-A-H. Toronto.
I do say Toronto. So there you go. I am a local. You can tell by how I say it. Going through the rest of the East real quick, as I said, and then we'll move to the West before we bring Jeff on to have a conversation with the Rhinos and the Eastern Conference specifically. As I said, Louisville is second, and there Cincinnati's third. So those top three seats are set. Since the Charlotte Independents, that team that we had a guest on earlier this year to talk about that as well, they have emerged into a solid fourth place team. Charleston, one of those original standalones, in there at fifth, and the Rochester Rhinos in sixth. So they are in with a chance to defend that title. Richmond and Orlando battling out at the bottom there for 7 and 8 right now, currently in the final playoff spots. If you're looking at the battle for the final playoff, as you mentioned, it will be between Wilmington and Orlando. I kind of have a soft spot for Wilmington to get that last spot over Orlando in this particular season because it is their last year. I do feel for the fans in Wilmington. It is a very small market that is getting outpaced by USL, and it sort of speaks to what I said earlier on in the first part of the show. If you're listening to this as USL only, you can catch this on Soccer Today on our Sports Podcasting Network feeds. I mentioned that maybe we need in the USL to sort of divide this into tiers so that some of these smaller markets and some of these teams that have more of a development focus can compete against like-minded teams. And I think that Wilmington and their hiatus might be one of those examples of why that's necessary. Before we move to the West, Kevin, quickly, let's just look at the bottom half of this. And FC Montreal is going to finish on the foot. It looks like, again, they can pass Pittsburgh.
Last game at home this weekend.
Yeah, and Toronto got a win at home to end their home season. They have the one game left, 26 points, 23 points for TFC. The two Canadian teams continue to struggle to compete with at the USL level because of their focus, perhaps because of the Canadian quota as well. Your thoughts overall on FC Montreal season as we say goodbye to them again?
Well, it was a tough season. And again, it had the brutal that eventually when they figured out how to compete, it was already long in the season. They did have a win streak, did have a unbeaten streak. So there was some positive in the FC Montreal. You have player signing, DiVeronica signing with the pro contract. He hasn't played a lot of minutes, if any, if I'm not mistaken, with the Impact, but still signed that pro contract, practicing with the first team more often than not. So you have that aspect to it. It's going to be interesting a season. What's going to happen now with players like Alessandro Rigi coming into next year? Is he at crossroads with FC Montreal? A young team focused with development, going close to U18 at some point. Age between 18 and 20 is the focus of the team. It'll be interesting to see how they move forward. We all do feel that they need some veteran going forward, so maybe you do keep your veterans going forward and trying to create an identity for yourself and trying to get things going forward. Development-wise, the USL team has been tremendous in development. Players like Maxime Crépeau given the time and place to play competitive games at a regular basis. So there is a lot of positives still, even though it was a tough season in the USL once again.
Yeah, we're up against it on time. We'll do a hyper focus on the Western Conference on next week's USL Radio, but for this week, let's keep the focus on the East. And I'll talk quickly on TFC too. Once again, plus 30 teams or 30 players played on this team, and this seems to be a common trend. Although I will say at the very end, there was a few hints that perhaps they're changing their philosophy a little bit. They brought in a couple players that don't really look like they're being brought in with MLS in mind to try and stabilize this team and make them more competitive for next season. And it would not surprise me if you see TFC take a slightly different approach next season. All right, we do need to take a break now. Come on and bring Jeff on the line. So Kevin, let's just go ahead and do that.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. And we're back on USL Radio on Soccer Today with Jeff DiVeronica of the Rochester Democrat. Jeff, how you doing today?
Terrific. How are you?
Pretty good.
Jeff, we wanted to have you on to talk about the Rhino season. They are, of course, the defending champions, had such a brilliant season last year. Some changes at the start of the year that we had you on to talk about. Overall, as we're approaching the final week, and the Rhinos are going to have a chance to defend it in the playoffs. How would you characterize the season for the Rhinos? Has it been a success?
I would say so. They had a lot of turnover, so more so than you'd think of a lot of championship teams. In part because of the ownership change in the offseason. Some guys, I think, left Rochester because they were worried what was going to happen here. Bob Lilly has done what Bob Lilly always does, is he finds a team that he can build through youth, through defense, and they're still one of the top 5 clubs in the Eastern Conference defensively. And offensively, they're actually a little bit better than they were last year. So they've had a lot of ties, a lot of draws that really hurt their positioning. There's still an outside chance they could grab the 4th seed, have a home game in the playoffs, but I don't think it's going to happen. Charlotte is ahead of them. Charleston has a tiebreaker over them. And even though Charlotte and Charleston both play the top 2 teams in the league in the final weekend of the USL season, I just don't think, and I think the Rhinos will beat Toronto in their regular season finale. I just see the Rhinos probably coming into the 5 seed in this. But they've had some injuries. They had to use an assistant coach who used to play for the Rhinos, George Kiriakis. He's 36. He actually started last week and helped the Rhinos beat Charlotte on the road 1-0. So, again, Bob Lilly knows how to organize a team and teach defense, and that's where they're based. But they actually are better offensively this summer.
Let's take a look at some of the individual performances, if you could, and sort of highlight to our listeners who really has stood out for the Rhinos in terms of their performance this season.
Well, it starts up top. Christian Bolesky, second-year pro. He was a first-round MLS draft pick, and he's kind of fell into the Rhinos' lap last year. Missed the end of the regular season and the postseason after being, I think, second on the team in goals. He had concussion, could not play in the postseason. And he and Steven Dos Santos up top have really played a lot more together this season. And I think Bolesky has 10 goals, 9 or 10 goals. He's been terrific and pretty consistent all year long. Dos Santos, his goal production is down a little bit from where I thought it would be. I think he's got 7 goals, but he's still dangerous, and he's doing a good job making those runs and dragging defenders out of the front of the goal so Bolesky has more space. I think Joe Farrell, center back for them, has been fantastic. Rookie, and he's been terrific. And Tomas Gomez, Adam Grinwis took an injury, and he's been out a little bit, but Tomas Gomez in goal has been really good for the Rhinos too. And I think that's kind of surprising because they thought Grinwis was going to be the guy here all year long. But Lilly likes to have 2 guys sharp and ready to go. Even if one guy gets most of the minutes, he'll kind of sprinkle in some minutes for the backup. And now Gomez, I think, is pretty much a starter for the Rhinos in goal. So I think those 3 guys have been very good.
If we're looking at the Rhinos' last game, Jeff, 1-0 win over the Charlotte Independents, a Bob Lilly type of win, I like to call them. We've seen this Montreal many, many years ago. 1-0, 2-0, 2-1, close games, defensively sound, like you mentioned. Their next game is against Toronto. What can we expect out of the Rhinos going to the playoff? To be solid defensively, or what is the key to the success for the Rhinos to try to repeat their championship win from last year?
I think the key is to attack. I think, and it's funny, Bob has this reputation of being a defensive-minded coach, and that is true to a degree. He likes possession. He likes to have his team build things up. Some people think that's defensive. He makes his forwards come back more than maybe a lot of coaches. But, when they have the ball, the other team doesn't. So Bob loves that aspect. I think you're going to see them really, really, ideally, they'd love to win like maybe 3 or 4-0 on Saturday. I mean, we're talking about a 12th place Toronto team, a team they should beat, a team they should gain some confidence. And what's interesting is the Rhinos have struggled to win matches, right? They're 12-5-12. But the last 2 matches on the road, which is where they're going to have to play in the playoffs, the last 2 regular season matches on the road, they went to Charleston and won by a goal, and went to Charlotte and won by a goal. These are 2 playoff teams. So defensively, things are going to be tight in the playoffs. And that's one reason why Bob Lilly has always been so adamant about having an organized defense, is that he knows in playoff soccer, you better be able to defend, because the chances up top will get a lot tighter to come by.
A likely potential opponent for the Rhinos in the playoff is FC Cincinnati, a very impressive attendance record this season. What could be a game in front of close to 30,000 people in Cincinnati for the Rhinos? What would be the aftermath of that game, and how difficult it could be to actually get a result on the road? Is it like the ultimate test already in the playoff if that matchup comes to fruition for the Rhinos?
I think people always tend to forget that when there's 30,000 fans, or if you're in the NWSL and there's 15 or 20,000 in Portland, it affects the opposing team too. The Rhinos beat Cincinnati in Rochester this year, and I believe they tied in Cincinnati in front of a good crowd. So I don't think there's any fear. I mean, I think this team has proven that they're tough on the road. And, I think they've only lost twice on the road all year long. So I think going on the road is not going to bother the team whatsoever. And again, like I said, back-to-back matches, they've beaten 2 playoff teams. Now, they needed a PK last week from Dos Santos in the first half to beat Charlotte. But to beat Charleston and to beat Charlotte on the road, those are good vibes for this team going into the playoffs, especially since I think the road to back to a championship game will be on the road, and certainly the title game probably won't be coming to Rochester either if the Rhinos come in as a 5 seed or 6.
To turn that attention back to the Rhinos for one sort of focused question here, as we talked about off the top, there was an ownership change this year. There was some questions about that at the start of the year. What has the new ownership been like? How has the community embraced the new ownership? What's the future of the Rhinos look? Are things looking better than they might have been a few months ago?
They look better than they were when there was no owner. I'll say that. I think David and Wendy Dworkin have learned a lot in their first year of being sports team owners. They run other businesses, but running a sports franchise is different. They've made some small strides. They've added different amenities around the stadium. The food's a little bit better. I went to a couple of matches actually as a fan, and I think some of the service could be better. But I think it's one of those things where you don't get a second chance to make a first impression on consumers and fans. I think they're a little more visible in the market with more marketing and advertising, which is going to help. But would I say that I think that it's been the type of spike in attendance they hope for? Absolutely not. In fact, I would think that while there might be more paid fannies in the seats, attendance probably is down over last year. And I think that's disappointing. But I think moving forward, they've learned a lot from this year, and they'll have a better plan and maybe some better people in place to help them at the start of year 2 for David and Wendy Dworkin with the Rhinos. But I don't think that the ownership group is any way, shape, or form going away. I mean, I think they're committed to a 3-year plan, and I think they'll assess where they are after 3 years.
Taking it league-wide this season, Jeff, what team impressed you outside of the Rhinos, maybe in the entire league or especially in the Eastern Conference going forward? What team are you looking forward to seeing in the playoffs?
I think the Red Bulls. I think the Red Bulls have been terrific. I think ideally this is exactly what the league wants and MLS wants from a reserve team and development of this relationship. So, I mean, they're good. And again, I think the Rhinos tied them the last matchup. So that bodes well also for the Rhinos' mentality that I think they had the Red Bulls beat a couple weeks ago here in Rochester and gave up a goal to end up in a 1-1 draw at home. But I think the Red Bulls have been very impressive. I love their coach is a former Rhino, John Wolonek. I think he's got a bright future in the game. And I think the Red Bulls have been very impressive to go through the schedule only lose a handful of matches. I know how tough that is in this league, which made it even more remarkable that the Rhinos, while they did have 10 draws last year, had only that one loss last season at Charlotte.
I'm curious, Jeff, to get your perspective on the two struggling B teams, two teams up here in Canada, and TFC and Montreal. They've gone very young, and they've really struggled to get results in this league. Is that something you think that those franchises are going to need to revisit in terms of how they approach the USL moving forward, to maybe put a little bit more of a veteran presence on those teams so that those teams are more competitive? Or do you think that their development model, their development focus is something that's going to work for them and is okay in this league setup?
Well, I think you have to have a couple of veterans. And I think it's not only good on the field to have a couple of veterans, but maybe more importantly, it's good to have them in the locker room, the guys that have been there before. So, and we've seen this actually in Rochester also with our American Hockey League affiliate, that you can't just have all young guys. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to work. It's not going to be a good developmental system. So I think if you're going too young, that you're going to have to change that. And I do think that, some of the great Rhinos championship teams of the past had guys that were in their 28 and 30 years old. Now, I think that might be a little older certainly older than they want in the USL now. But to have a 25 or 26-year-old, I think that's been a pro for a few years. I think that will help on and off the field. So I think that'd be a smart modification if that's what TFC and Montreal need to do.
When we're looking at a landscape of American soccer that is very not sure, not on stable ground, especially at the NASL, USL level, I'm interested to have your take on it, Jeff. Can the USL absorb a few NASL team maybe next year? What's your take on that proposition or that rumor that's going on right now?
I don't. I think they certainly can. I think the USL and has always been on much more stable ground than the North American Soccer League. Let's not forget it has a historic name, but it's a league that hasn't been around in years. I actually thought that the North American Soccer League would struggle and be gone already by now. So I'm not surprised to hear they're finally having some troubles in the NASL. I think you talk about veterans, right? Getting veterans into lineups. If the USL and some of the maybe the franchises that want to bolster winning, I think you go maybe try to go get some players from the NASL that are maybe a little concerned about their future of the league with the North American Soccer League. Do I think that the USL will absorb a couple of NASL teams? Only if they're really dynamite markets. But I don't think they need to. I think the USL, honestly, they keep adding teams, and I'm almost wondering at what point are they going to consider max capacity. I don't think a 40-team league is going to benefit anybody. But if the NASL goes away, I'd like to see them take some of those veteran players off of those raw franchises and sprinkle them around the USL to make the product of the USL better than it is, than to just have a 40-team league where it's maybe a little more watered down than it really should be, just for the fan experience and seeing a better caliber of soccer.
Do you think that if it did get to 40 teams, that they could perhaps move to a two-tiered league where you have maybe even room for movement in between the divisions and some kind of promotion scheme? Is that something that would work in American soccer?
I think you'd have to. I mean, let's not forget, there used to be USL 2, USL 1. I think you'd have to do something like that. I just don't know if you could have, we talk about here 4 10-team divisions. I don't see that working. But there's a lot of guys down in Tampa that are smarter than me. They've been doing this for a lot longer than me. So I'd be curious to see what a guy like Tom Beat within the USL would think about that.
All right. You had an opportunity this past week. Let's move our attention away from USL to end the conversation because Abby Wambach, of course, released her biography. You had an opportunity to talk there. What has the reaction in her hometown been to the release of that book?
It's been some surprise. I don't think anyone knew her alcohol struggles were anywhere near this dire. So I think it's been some surprise, but I also think, in Rochester, we don't produce a lot of, iconic worldwide superstars, and she's it for us. And I think there's also been a lot of love that's been shown to Abby Wambach. I covered her since she was 14 years old. I've worked for the paper for that long, And I know her better than most journalists. And I did not, I knew she liked to celebrate and have a drink once in a while. I had no idea that her struggles were this great, and that she had nowhere to turn to really, didn't feel she had anywhere to turn for help. But, I think she did this, and some people have told me, she did this to sell books. I think that's a byproduct of this. I don't think that's the reason she did this. Abby did this because she said in an interview with me last week, I did this because I was, quote, killing myself, and I needed to change. She did this as more of a way to cleanse herself, to start again. All the sins of the past, all the secrets are now out there, and she's starting fresh. She doesn't have anything to hide anymore. But she hid this alcoholism from a lot of people, including some of her family members, to the degree of which she struggled with it. And her honesty and the raw details she put in that book, she didn't do it to sell books. She did this because she wanted everything out there. And that's kind of the way she operates. She's kind of a black and white person. And this was her way to kind of heal herself. And I'm proud of the way she handled it. It's been pretty brave than to kind of hide behind a veil. Now that's been removed. Now she can move forward and being the type of role model I think she really will be more proud of being, instead of being this patriotic superstar athlete, just being a person. I asked her last week if she still thought she was a role model. And she says, I just want to be me, and I want to be honest with who I am and put that out there. And if people choose to follow me, great. But I just need to be me and not be who people think I am. And I think she kind of got lost in some of that stardom and needed to say the right things and do the right things and act the right way. And got kind of caught up in that. But now I think she's back to being genuine and being the real Mary Abigail Wambach.
Well, you know her well, as you said. So I'm curious whether you think that she's the type of personality that's going to embrace the positive aspects, the positive potential of putting this stuff out there and putting her demons on display to try and prevent others from having the same things happen to them. Do you think she's someone that will embrace that aspect of it?
Oh, I think she's already doing that. In fact, number one reason to write the book, she said, was, this book wasn't going to be about all this. It was going to be about this gloried soccer career. And then she got this DUI in April, and she said, I have to change. I have to use this to be my catalyst to change and put it all out there. And now the last 6 months from April to now has been about her healing. And she's still in that process, she said. But now the goal is to go around the country and heal other people and tell them that don't be ashamed. If you've got a problem with alcoholism, you got a problem with any sort of dependency on drugs, don't be ashamed. Go to a meeting, find a friend, find a family member, find somebody you can confide in and can help you get through it, because she feels really lucky that it didn't end up worse for her. She sat in a meeting for 3 hours and listened to people who've been affected with alcohol-related crashes, be it themselves or they have lost family members, and she cried for 3 hours. And it's been a real change for her. She called it a cathartic journey. And again, I know her well enough to know that she didn't have to do this to sell books. She's Abby freaking Wambach, right? She would have sold books no matter what. She did this, I really think, to change her life. She was going down a road she didn't like, and that was a real humiliation for her, and she was really ashamed back on April 2nd that she let so many people down, but most importantly let herself down, because she knew. Her last game was December 16th in New Orleans. December 17th, she flew to Rochester, got the key to the city, got cheered by all of her hometown fans, and the next day she flew to New York City for some more media appearances. And she said she sat on the floor of her hotel room and just said, I hated myself. I was ashamed of who I was and who I was becoming. And I felt like a fraud and a phony, because people were shaming me for being this great person. And I now have to go around the country, look in the eyes of these young kids at soccer clinics and tell them how to be a great person, and how to run their lives, and how to be a good athlete, and be a good individual, be a good friend to other people. And I wasn't being that to myself. I felt like a fraud. And it's honestly a good read. I'm not just saying that. It was a lot more detail than I ever thought we'd get from Abby. She really tells the phrase "tell all book" is probably overused. She really doesn't disclose. Everything is disclosed. The day she talked to her mother for the first time about being a lesbian, it's all in there. The dates, the night she lost her virginity to a boy when she was in high school. She pulls back the curtain, and she just didn't want any secrets anymore. And I admire her for that, because I don't know if a lot of people would do that.
It's pretty powerful stuff, Jeff. We appreciate your insight on that. Let the listeners know how they can follow you and read your work before we say goodbye.
On Twitter, you can get me at RockDevo. That's ROCDEVO. And there's a link there to all my stuff at the Democrat Chronicle. And I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you having me on, guys.
All right. Cheers. Thanks for being on.
Thank you.
Until next time, which is tomorrow at 11 a.m. for Soccer Today, well, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.